Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Canada Truth Channel, where Canada, the illusion of freedom and system of control, is exposed. Today's video: why in 1931 Canada chose not to exercise its full autonomy as provided under the Statute of Westminster. That's a very good question, and we will find out the government's answer to that question in this video. In the next video in this series, we will find out what Russell Roger Smith says about the Statute of Westminster and what it did for Canada, and specifically the provinces and the people of the provinces. Russell Roger Smith was one of the authors of the three sections in the Statute of Westminster pertaining to Canada. They were submitted to the British Imperial Parliament through Mackenzie King, who at the time, if memory serves correctly, was the Secretary of State and External Affairs for Canada. So, anyways, this will be 3 parts, hopefully. The third part, I'm trying to get my hands on the Canada Gazette issue pertaining when they announced the enactment of the Statute of Westminster and what they told the people of Canada about it. In case you did not know, it's required when acts and statutes are published that they're published in the Canada Gazette. That is the required way for the government to communicate these things to the public. Anyhow, let's get going. For those of you that don't know what the Statute of Westminster is, let's see what the Government of Canada says. Now, that being said, the Government of Canada these days is all about the terms misinformation and disinformation. And wow, this is full of it. So here we go. Right off the bat, number one, why in 1931 Canada chose not to exercise its full autonomy as provided under the Statute of Westminster? Well, Canada did not choose. The government of Canada chose. Perhaps unbeknownst to the people of Canada. So this is misinformation right off the bat. This implies that the people of Canada chose not to exercise this autonomy, when I'm pretty sure at the time, if the people of Canada would have been given this opportunity to write their own constitution, create their own laws, keep all of the resources in the provinces owned by the people of the provinces, I'm pretty sure they would have chose that route and could have written constitutions in every province and then had a referendum to see if they would federally unite to legally create the Canada that we have all been led to believe exists. Okay, sorry. End of rant. The Dominion of Canada was constituted following the ratification of the British North America Act 1867 by the British Parliament. Now, right off the bat, constituted. If you look up the word constituted in a law dictionary, it means created by law. It does not mean a constitution. It means created by law. The Dominion of Canada was in fact created by law through the British North America Act by the British Parliament. Now, what it should also say is the British North America Act 1867 united 4 British colonies into one British colony called the Dominion of Canada. Okay, moving on. Other British colonies, there you go, were constituted, created in turn as their dominions, including Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Newfoundland, and the Irish Free State. The dominions were quasi-autonomous states of the British Empire. Now here we go again, more misinformation. Canada, anyway, it's very clear through the Interpretation Act of 1889 that the Dominion of Canada was a British possession and a colony, united colony of Great Britain. So, more misinformation right off the bat. The dominions were quasi-autonomous states of the British Empire. They exercised their autonomy over domestic affairs through their respective legislative assembly, but deferred to London with respect to external affairs in their constitution. In Canada's case, except for a few provisions, only the British Parliament had the power to amend the British North America Act 1867, as it had done on several occasions at the request of Canadian authorities. Okay, so Australia, for example, wrote their own constitution. I believe other dominions did as well. That's not my concern. Canada did not write their own constitution. Australia wrote their constitution, I believe, in 1901. So, okay. Only the British Parliament had the power to amend the British North America Act, 1867. Of course, only the British Parliament had that power because they're the ones who created it. Those who create own. It's a maximum of law. So, as far as Canada is concerned, the British North America Act 1867 was never a constitution. It constituted the Dominion of Canada through law. That law was the British North America Act. Moving right along. Over the years, the dominions exercised their sovereignty on numerous occasions with respect to foreign policy. Okay, once again, ladies and gentlemen, exercising your sovereignty when you are a colony of another nation is impossible. More misinformation and disinformation in the case of the Dominion of Canada. Once again, I'm not sure about the other dominions. But Canada exercised no sovereignty because, once again, according to the Interpretation Act, to make things clear, of 1889, the Dominion of Canada was a British colony. It's their laws, not mine. It's not me saying it. I have shown people in previous videos. Anyhow, moving right along. It became necessary to clarify their status as quasi-autonomous states. An imperial conference was held in 1926 to discuss that issue. It produced, among other things, the Balfour Declaration, which recognized the dominions were autonomous communities within the British Empire, equal in status, in no way subordinate to one another, in any respect of their domestic or external affairs, though united by a common allegiance to the crown and freely associated as members of the British Commonwealth of Nations. Okay, well, back in 1867, the people of Nova Scotia voted against joining the United British Colony called the Dominion of Canada under the British North America Act. They sent a delegate to the British Parliament and it was voted on and denied. So it wasn't voluntary compliance. The people of Nova Scotia were forced to join the other three provinces to form the Dominion of Canada, a united British colony. So there was no free association. It remained for this de facto situation to be recognized through an act of the British Parliament. Discussions continued, notably at the Imperial Conference of 1930. In 1931, the Statute of Westminster was ratified by the British Parliament. It granted Dominions full legal autonomy, except in those areas where they chose not to take advantage of that autonomy. Now, this, once again, is misleading. Nowhere in the Statute of Westminster does it say, except in those areas where they choose not to. That's ridiculous. That is misinformation. However, some dominions, including Canada, I don't know about other dominions, once again, but I know Canada had in fact expressed reservations about obtaining their full legal autonomy. And again, this isn't Canadians, this isn't the people of Canada, this is the government of Canada. Now, you have to ask yourself, why would the government of Canada choose not to exercise its full autonomy as provided for under the Statute of Westminster? Canada is one of the wealthiest nations on the planet through its resources. We have everything. We have absolutely everything here. We're the second largest landmass nation in the world, second to Russia, right? So imagine the personal wealth and the level of life Canadians could have if the Canadian people were benefiting from the resources of their provinces. Okay, so why would the Canadian government not want this to happen? Three main reasons. Power. If they told the people of Canada about the Statute of Westminster and what it did for the provinces, and specifically the people of the provinces, they would all lose their jobs. They would lose their power over the people and resources of Canada. Number two, paychecks. They'd all lose their jobs, right? The Canadian government was a government to assist and advise the Governor General on behalf of the Crown and Chancellery of the United Kingdom of Great Britain. Number three, their pensions. If they don't have a job under the British North America Act anymore, they have to go out and get a real job, don't they? not to mention the ability to grift and enrich themselves through the taxation and resources of the Canadian people. Okay, sorry for the rant. Canada's reservations relating to the Statute of Westminster. In the case of Canada, full legal autonomy applied that the British North America Act 1867 and the British Acts amending it, as well as the power to amend these acts, would become Canadian laws. Oh, good grief. More disinformation, misinformation, deliberate deception and fraud, whatever you want to call it. Okay, nowhere in the Statute of Westminster does it imply that the British North America Act 1867 and the power to amend it would become Canadian law. Nowhere in that statute did it apply this. This is absolutely false. Such a prospect was a source of concern for Canada, a federation in which jurisdiction was shared. It wasn't a federation, it was a united British colony under a central and local legislatures. That's exactly what Canada was. Who would henceforth have the power to amend Canada's constitutional acts? Well, there are no constitutional acts, number one. And number two, the British Imperial Parliament wrote the British North America Act, so therefore they are the only ones that have the authority to amend it in any way. Only the Government of Canada? The Government of Canada and the provincial governments? There was no provision to effect in the British North America Act 1867 or acts amending it. Well, big conundrum. If you are a normal person like me, you can understand one of the maxims of law is that who creates owns, right? So the British Imperial Parliament created the British North America Act 1867, therefore they own it, therefore they're the only ones with the authority to amend it, which is clear in the Statute of Westminster. So all of this stuff is just, at best, misinformation or disinformation, at worst, deliberate deception and fraud. I will leave it up to you all to decide for yourselves. In November 1927, a Dominion Provincial Conference was held in Ottawa. The topics discussed by the Dominion and provincial First Ministers included procedure for amending the Constitution, but no agreement could be reached thereon. Of course not, because they had no authority to amend the Constitution, and the Statute of Westminster granted them no authority. It granted them autonomy from the British North America Act. Canada's preoccupations relating to obtaining its full legal autonomy remained. No, not Canada's. Canada's federal government specifically. It was therefore proposed during the discussions that took place in London that the power to amend Canada's constitution be excluded from the provisions of the statute. That's blatantly obvious. Canada could thus acquire its autonomy at the same time as the other dominions and then settle that question in due course. That is so ridiculous. There's no constitution in Canada. If you call a bear a potato, until you convince yourself and maybe everyone around you, that a bear is in fact a potato, and you maintain this false belief, and others maintain this false belief, eventually someone's going to poke that bear with a fork and they're going to get bitten. Calling the British North America Act a constitution does not make it a constitution. It never was a constitution. It constituted the Dominion of Canada, which united 4 British colonies into 1 British colony. That's all. A constitution is a document forming a government and rights and freedoms written by the people for the people and ratified by the people. That forms their form of government and powers to create laws. So, sorry for the ranting. The restrictive clause which applied to Canada read as follows: nothing in this Act, the Statute of Westminster, shall be deemed to apply to the repeal, amendment, or alteration of the British North America Acts 1867 to 1930, or any order, rule, or regulation made thereunder. The power to amend the Canadian, see, misinformation, disinformation, deliberate deception, and fraud. The power to amend the British North America Act 1867 would thus remain in the Parliament of the United Kingdom. Restrictive clauses or conditions of application also pertain to Australia, New Zealand, and Newfoundland. But this, once again, I'll let you decide. Calling the British North America Act the Canadian Constitution. See, it says right above it, the British North America Acts 1867 to 1930, or any order or rule or regulation made thereunder. If the British Imperial Parliament meant the Canadian Constitution, they would have stated the Canadian Constitution. Okay. Lastly, in 1982, after federal provincial negotiations and at the request of Canada, the power to amend the Canadian Constitution was repatriated in Canada. Okay. Lastly, the Canadian Constitution. They should be saying the British North America Act 1867 was patriated in Canada is the correct terminology. You cannot repatriate something that's never been patriated. Again, more deliberate deception and fraud. The parts of the Statute of Westminster pertaining to Canada. Now, we've gone through the government's explanation. To save time, I'm going to cut it short and only review the sections written by Canadians for Canadians, and that is Section 2, Section 7, Section 2, Section 4, Section 7, and 11. So bear with me. Section 2, validity of laws made by Parliament of a Dominion. The Colonial Laws Validity Act 1865 shall not apply to any law made after the commencement of this act by the Parliament of a Dominion. No law and no provision of any law made after the commencement of this act by the Parliament of a Dominion shall be void or inoperative on the ground that it is repugnant to the law of England, or to the provision of any existing or future act of Parliament of the United Kingdom, or to any order, rule, or regulation made under such act. And the powers of Parliament of a Dominion shall include the power to repeal or amend any such act, order, or rule, or regulation insofar as the same is part of the law of that Dominion. This one that no one speaks of, that I'm sure in the eventual legal argument this will come out. Parliament of the United Kingdom not to legislate for Dominion except by consent. Very important. No act of Parliament of the United Kingdom passed after the commencement of this act shall extend or be deemed to extend to a dominion as part of the law of that dominion, unless it is expressly declared in that act that the dominion has requested and consented to the enactment thereof. So the Dominion of Canada would have to ask for the British Imperial Parliament to create laws. Here is something very important. Meaning of colony in future acts. Notwithstanding anything in the Interpretation Act 1889, the expression colony shall not in any act of the Parliament of the United Kingdom passed after the commencement of this act include a dominion or any province or state forming part of a dominion. Very, very important. So Section 11 took the status of the province forming the Dominion of Canada, took that status from colony to sovereign state. Period. That's it. That's all. You can see it for yourself. Now, once again, why in 1931 did the government of Canada choose not to exercise its full autonomy as provided for under the Statute of Westminster? And more importantly, why in 1931 did the government of Canada choose not to inform the people of the opportunity to create their own constitution and a legal, lawful country of Canada of their own? Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next video. We will be reviewing the transcript of an interview Russell Rogers Smith did with George Barr, King's Counsel, in, I believe it was 1947 in Montreal. Then the third part, hopefully we're going to get the Canada Gazette issue where they announced the passing of the Statute of Westminster. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned.